I saw a thread discussing this on social media. I think Elon Musk weighed in, but I thought it was so interesting, particularly on Good Friday, a day where we celebrate, I think, the innate goodness of the Christian faith. And I think it actually ties in very much with modern history in the United States. And you guys know I am a super history nerd. I went, and my wife still makes fun of me for it, in high school to Civil War sleepaway camp on scholarship to Gettysburg College, where they have something called the Civil War Institute. And that week, the focal point was the 1864 Shenandoah Valley campaign of Jubal Early that came to the edge of Washington, D.C., and Abraham Lincoln actually was poking his head up above the parapets when there were Confederate soldiers firing at Union officers and Union soldiers inside of the fort works and protections around Washington, D.C. Now, if you're a Civil War history nerd, you were like, oh, you love every little discussion. I live near the Battle of Franklin, Western Theater. I'm obsessed with Civil War. But when I told my wife this, she said, I can't believe that people would voluntarily have done this. Go live in the dorms, that I would have applied for a scholarship, that I would have attempted to spend a week doing this. I love it. I still love everything about American history. And that's why I've been particularly upset by the notion that has really taken root. I would say driven by much of the 1619 Project and everything that the New York Times tried to put out, that the legacy of American history is one of shame, that we all have much penance and retribution that we should be paying on behalf of this nation's history. And in particular, I find that to be completely wrong and an errant reading of American history. And I think about that because one of the best days that I've had the good fortune to spend in my life was touring the beaches of Normandy. Several years ago, we had a personal private tour guide. I took all three of my boys. They were young. I think they, as they get older, will experience and realize the incredible experience that we had even more. But I think they understood it even as young kids. We got to tour all the beaches of Normandy. And we got to see all of these still bunkers that are there and don't look very much different than they did in World War II. Still many of them with the German apparatus. Big weapons now without, obviously, the ability to fire, but much of the vista, much of the ground, much of the battlefield still not very changed. It's still farmland in northern France in a way that it looked very similar when all those guys came ashore on June 6, 1944. And I was thinking about that as I got ready for today's show. And I was thinking about not only what we did to liberate Europe, but also what we did to win the war in the Pacific. And I was thinking in particular about good versus evil, which is certainly a huge part of the discussion of this weekend in particular. Now, I know all of you are like me, trying to be better every day than you actually are, right? You're trying to be kinder. You're trying to be gentler. You're trying to be better than some of your worst impulses. And I was thinking about this in the context of American history. When we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end the war in the Pacific, America had at that point in time the greatest power in the history of the world. We had the ability to drop a bomb on anyone we wanted to in the whole world and effectively end the civilization of that country or of that city or of that region. We could have created, based on our technology, more of those bombs, and we could have taken over the entire world. I want you to think about that. In 1945, no country in the history of the world has had a greater technological advantage over everybody else in the whole world. We had the ability to take over every country in the world. We could have made them all bend their knee to us. We could have become a global dictatorship. The United States of America had a power unparalleled in the history of modern civilization, in the history of humanity. No one has ever had the power that we had over the rest of the world in 1945. And do you know what we did with it? We put our weapons aside, we allowed Japan to surrender, and we rebuilt all of Europe. And we allowed all of those countries to make their own decisions about who governed them and how they were going to look. And we did such an incredible job rebuilding with the Marshall Plan, with everything that we did in Asia, that Japan in the 1980s we thought was going to surpass the United States within just a couple of generations of us dropping bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We were so forgiving and kind and generous as a country that we sacrificed the blood of our own nation to liberate a continent that we were not on in Europe and to protect freedom around the world when we had the ability to take everyone else's freedom. And so I get particularly fired up when anyone tries to argue about American history as a somehow awful legacy. Every single one of you, think about that for a minute, in particular as it pertains to this weekend and what it represents. Forgiveness, redemption, the idea of power leavened with generosity. The idea of willing to give your life for good at the expense of evil. And I want you to think about not only that victory over evil, but how we responded when we had that victory. And whether, and I believe it is, that response of forgiveness is directly connected to the Judeo-Christian ideals that are celebrated on this weekend. The idea that you can forgive evil and even extend a hand to evil and allow good to come from something that was at one point evil is a uniquely Christian idea. And I think it's the underpinning foundation of the country. And so much of what we are being told and your kids and grandkids are being told is frankly untrue. And it's a misguided and miscast version of what was that is being used to justify what could be in the future. You may have heard us talking some yesterday on the program, and I thought a lot more about it after we had that conversation, Buck and myself. The bastardization of our history and the legacy of its significance is being manipulated to destroy our future. And there are so many awful aspects to it, but ultimately I see it most personified. I think it ties in with everything when so many young people are being convinced that American history is bad and that there should be an apology for it. And I want to expound on this a little bit more when I come back, but all of this to me is directly connected to the legacy of Western civilization, which is under attack like never before. The only reason that you can attack today's society is because Western civilization, in particular capitalism, republic, democracies, all of these things provide so much wealth and opportunity that most people in democracies and in Western civilized countries today don't have to worry about spending their whole life trying to have the necessary goods to be able to survive. We have such an abundance of riches that we attack the entire system that created our abundance of riches. But I just want all of you today to think about what I just said. Back in 1945, never has a country been more powerful in the history of the world. Never could a country have taken over the world with more ease than America in 1945. And what we did was extend a hand and allow all of those countries that had been engaged in evil against us the opportunity to rise up and redeem themselves, which to me is uniquely connected to this weekend and the history of Judeo-Christianity, not only in this country, but in the world. I think it's a profound and incredible thing that you probably won't hear anyone mention or even discuss almost ever. And yet, I think it is probably one of the brightest moments in American history and indeed in the history of the world. And I don't think it would have happened without the rise of Western civilization, the connection of Christianity, and the incredible success and growth of this country into a bright and shining light for good in a world that far too often gives itself over to evil. Talk about that more a little bit, but it is Easter. And I've been telling you guys that I want you to be able to preserve your family memories. Grandkids, kids, maybe they're going to be running around, nieces, nephews, cousins, little ones, dressed up sometimes like bunnies, little Easter baskets running around, grabbing all the Easter eggs everywhere. You're probably going to have those memories preserved on your phone. Probably going to take photos, probably going to take videos. You're going to share it. People all over the world, all around the country that are your friends and families. And you'll rest assured that's going to be on your phone. It's going to be on the cloud. It's going to be on your laptops, your computers. You're going to have it preserved. How many of you have preserved your VHS tapes? Your old family photos from Easter. Grandma, grandpa, great-grandma, great-grandpa, dressed up in their Easter finery. Best suit, best dress, best hat, whatever the case may be. How many of you have transferred those to digital files to ensure that you have them forever? I bet not a lot of you. That's why you need to go to Legacy Box right now. VHS tapes. How many of you even still have a VCR? Old family gatherings, old family photos. Go to legacybox.com/clay and make it your Easter gift to your family that you're going to preserve their family legacy forever via digital files that you can email, that you can share on your phones, that you can pass from one to another. Get hooked up right now. 65% off if you use my name, Clay. Legacybox.com/clay. That is legacybox.com/clay.